We'll be going over Community Reception Center and Population Monitoring Enhancements in today's special feature webinar that were recently implemented over the past few months. The Population Monitoring and Community Reception Center module in RadResponder is something that we have to turn on for organizations. So if this is something that you're interested in, we can enable it for you. The population monitoring features lets organizations create CRCs as facility types, and then you can create population screening records for those CRCs within your event space. If this, again, is something that you are interested in and it's something that your organization would leverage, email us and we will be able to enable this module for you. The way the population monitoring data module works in RadResponder is that it is aggregated at the facility level, and we do not take in data on specific individuals. The initial population monitoring module was launched in 2017, and throughout the past 5 years, the module remained pretty much the same. Then in 2022, in coordination with the Centers for Disease Control and the Conference of Radiation Control Program Directors, RadResponder began gathering requirements to approve upon and enhance the existing functionality. And with their feedback and responses, we added the animal and vehicle screening information along with other methods of flexibility, so you can really customize your CRC and your population screening records. Once your organization has the population monitoring module enabled, you do need to enable the population monitoring function at the event level in order to actually submit data. The screenshot that you see here is an event setting screenshot, and if you do have population monitoring enabled, you will see this checkbox. Something important to note, and this did come up during some exercises, is that if you have partners on your event and their organization does not have population monitoring enabled, those partners will not be able to view or enter population data. So even though the event may support population monitoring, if the organization itself that's a partner on the event does not, they will not be able to leverage that function. So we'll now go ahead and get into sort of the logistics side of how you can add community reception centers to your organization space. Adding CRCs to your organization is going to basically follow the same steps as adding any facility would. So from your organization space, you'll want to expand the configuration menu on the left-hand side and open up facilities. From the facility page, as long as you have the proper roles, you will see a button that says Add Facility. By adding a CRC to your organization, you can then efficiently carry them down to the events where your population monitoring data will be recorded. So this way you can set up your organization CRC once and then copy them down to the events as you create them. Once you select Add Facility, you'll then be brought to the facility creation form. You'll need to fill in all of the required fields just like you would with any other facility. But when you get to type, this is when you want to select CRC or Community Reception Center. If you do not select this type, you will not be able to leverage the population monitoring function with this facility. You'll fill in all the other information, so sharing mode, for example. If you select partners only, you'll be able to then share this facility with other partners so they can add them to their events as well. You'll see some additional facility settings. So for example, if the facility is active and you have these information boxes next to each of the fields for more information. Default event scenarios, so which event scenarios should this facility be automatically added to? And you can choose a custom icon, so when you are viewing the facility on the event map, it stands out to you. Choosing default event scenarios means that this CRC will then automatically be added to events that match any of the scenario types you select. So for this form here, I am saying that for any event that my organization creates that has the type of, or the scenario of nuclear detonation, nuclear power plant, public contamination or exposure, or RDD, this CRC will automatically be added to my event, so I don't have to worry about creating a CRC at the event level or copying it down from my organization space. Highly recommend you do this in an emergency. You know, sometimes it's easy to forget steps like this, so by making sure that these facilities are added by default, You're taking out a step when you're actually creating the event and starting to work within it. Next, you'll choose a location for the CRC, so you can use any of those location entry modes that will look familiar to you. And then you'll be presented with the Community Reception Center Details section. The Community Reception Center Details is going to be a lot more robust and flexible. You're going to be presented first with the general information, so the date it opened, the estimated throughput per hour, and the point of contact. Next, you need to determine if your CRC has decontamination available and if animals and/or vehicles are accepted. If you do select animals and/or vehicles, you'll be presented with some additional fields later on in the form. You'll now be presented with any resources that your CRC has. So you can select this Add Resource option, and you can choose to add detectors, portal monitors, showers, or staff. And then you can assign the quantity to those. After you have the general information and the assigned resources for your specific CRC details, you'll then be presented with some contamination screening criteria. Depending on whether you selected animals and/or vehicles, this will determine which categories you'll be presented with. My screen here, I'm seeing contamination screening criteria for people and animals. You are required to enter the contamination criteria for people with external contamination, animals with external contamination, and vehicles with fixed contamination. What this means is you just need to define what external contamination means. So for example, in this people with external contamination field, it says that the minimum reading for which a person should be identified as having external contamination is 10 MR per hour. You can customize this for people, vehicles, animals, and you can also add additional screening criteria if this is something that you have and track. If you want to do that, you'll select the green Add Criteria for People, and you can choose from this list. So we have people with internal contamination, people with signs of ARS, and people sent or referred to hospitals. After you enter your contamination criteria for people, vehicles, and/or animals, you'll then be presented with this screening characteristics section. So this is going to determine what you're actually tracking when you're entering your aggregate population information. Again, if you did work with this module pre-February, March of this year, you'll notice that the pregnant and younger than 18 are those two characteristics that already existed. That's why they have these default markers here. So if that's all that your CRC tracks, that's all that you care about for your information, then there's really no additional steps you need to take. However, if you do want to add or remove various characteristics for people, you can. You'll see that there is a green Add Characteristics for People option, and you'll see some additional characteristics. This is going to allow for the flexibility of your tracking. So you can either remove any of the default characteristics that you had. So if pregnant and younger than 18 is not something you care to track, you are more than welcome to remove those. But if you did want to track folks within a mile radius of the incident, those with stomas or open wounds, those who recently received cancer treatment, nuclear medicine, or radiation therapy, and or those that have access or functional needs, you are able to then add them. The same goes for animals and vehicles. There are less options for customization here. So the only options that you have for animal characteristics are household pets and service animals. And for vehicles, the only options that you have are city public vehicles, emergency response vehicles, or private vehicles, but you do have the option to remove them. Okay, and the last section is contact information. So if you have any CRC specific contacts, whether or not they're a CBRN responder user, you can go ahead and fill out this Add Contact form, and they'll be added to this record. After this, you can finally save your CRC and it will be added to your organization. If you already had a CRC created prior to these updates, you can just simply go ahead and go into your CRC and select Edit for your existing Community Reception Center, and you'll be able to fill out all of these new fields. After you save your facility, you'll be brought to the Facility Details page, so you can edit, like I just mentioned, an existing one or the one that you just created. But if you do want to edit any CRC specific details, you'll need to select the edit button next to the Community Reception Center details child list or table. If you expand the details, you're going to see a more condensed view of what went into that form. So we have our General tab, Assigned Resources, Contamination Criteria, and Screening Characteristics. If I select Screening Characteristics, I'm then going to see for people, the ones that I selected, animals, vehicles. And if I select Contamination Criteria, I'll also see what I set for those contamination criteria. We can select View History, and we'll see if they were changed. So those are the current criteria that we have set, and here is basically the action log of how those various contamination criteria were defined. So now that we have the CRC created at the organization level, we'll now talk about how you can actually create an event with the population monitoring module enabled, and how you can bring that CRC down to the event if it wasn't added by default. There are a few ways that you can do this. You can either create a new event with the population monitoring module enabled, or you can edit an existing event to add population monitoring. If you do wish to create a new event, you can do so from the website or the mobile application. You do have to have that event creator role. From the home page, you can either select that green Create button from the tile, or from the upper ribbon, you can select that down button and select Create an Event. Either way, you'll be brought to the event creation form. You'll fill in all of the required fields. And then when you get to the bottom under Event Settings, you'll see a Supports Population Monitoring option. If you want to enable population monitoring for this event, you'll check that box. If you do not see the option, this either means that you did not select the radiological hazard type for your event, or it's not enabled. So I do have our support email on here. Just email us and we'll grant you access to the population monitoring module for your organization. Now, if you had a pre-existing event, but you want to enable population monitoring, you'll simply just need to navigate to that event space, open up the details of that event. You'll want to scroll down to the event settings table. If it says no for supports population monitoring, you'll want to select that manage option and then check the supports population monitoring setting. You'll save that and your event now has population monitoring enabled. Step 1 is complete. We have population monitoring enabled for the event. Now we want to make sure that our community reception centers have been added. This means that you can now start collecting data, since all population records must be associated with a CRC. So if they weren't added by default, we'll show you how you can add them manually or create an ad hoc facility at the event level. When you were creating your community reception center at the organization level, we talked about those default event scenarios. If you selected default event scenarios, and then when you created the event, you chose a scenario, the CRC will automatically be added to the event. For example, if we're using the demo CRC, one of the default event scenarios was nuclear power plant. I can then see that I selected my event scenario as nuclear power plant, and because nuclear power plant is one of those default event scenarios, my CRC will automatically be added. If you did not set up your organization CRC to have default event scenarios, you can always manually add it to your event. To do so, you'll open up the Configuration tab in the event space on the left-hand side and select Facilities. At the top, you'll see a Add Facility option. In here, you'll have then the ability to either create a new facility or select from existing. And since you already have your organization facility set up, you'll select the Select from Existing option and choose your facility. Once you've selected that facility, you'll want to make sure the status is set to either live or open, so that way you can submit data into the Community Reception Center. You'll be presented with the details of the CRC that you created at the organization level. So the general information and assigned resources are going to be a read-only view, so you cannot edit them at the event level, but if you want to edit them, you can do so from the organization side. And then you'll be presented with the contamination screening criteria and screening characteristics. These are in an editable view, so you can update them if something has changed or if you want to make something specific to this event. So you can update the contamination screening criteria and the characteristics for people, animals, and vehicles. Lastly, you'll just need to set the hours of operations, and you'll select Save, and your organization CRC is then added to the event space. If you did not create an organization level CRC, you can always create one ad hoc. You'll go to the same facilities page, select Add Facility, but instead of selecting from an existing one, you'll select this Create New option. And you'll be presented with basically the same fields that you had at the organization side, except you're not choosing default event scenarios because you're creating this CRC specific to this event. Once you have your facility or your CRC added, there are a few options that you have. You can choose to remove the CRC from the event if you no longer want to associate population data with it. You can delete the facility only if no population data has been associated with it. You can disable it, so this means that your community reception center will be inactive. All historical information will be kept, but you won't be able to associate any more data with that CRC. And you can always edit. So you can edit all information about the community reception center, including the general information, screening criteria, screening characteristics, and more. Step 1 was creating the event. Step 2 is making sure the CRC is on the event if it wasn't added by default automatically. And now it's time to actually enter your population data. You can only enter population records from the website, not the mobile application, so something to keep in mind here. And you do have 2 ways to enter the data from the web. So from your event space, you can expand the Data tab on the left-hand side and select Population Data. From here, you'll see a list of all the data that's already been collected and this green button to create a record. Or you can go to the Submit Data page within the event space and click on the Population Data icon. Both ways are going to bring you to the Create Screened Population Record form. As a reminder, you are entering the aggregate data for a specific time period. You're not entering individual data. You'll fill in all of the required fields, and then when you get to the facility, you'll select your CRC. And then for the start and end date, you're going to want to enter the time range for when this data was collected. So note that the times do have to correspond to your event start and end dates. I have my start and end date as a 24-hour period. And now I am presented with people as the first section. Here I can edit the contamination criteria and characteristics if I want to, but I don't have to. I can remove a contamination criteria, I can add one, and I can edit one. And same for the characteristics, I can remove any that are pre-existing or I can add any if I want for this specific record. If the way the CRC was set up is the way I want to enter my data, you can ignore this section and scroll down to the screened population details for people. Here is where you're going to enter that aggregate information. The first section or the first field is the total number of people screened. This is going to be the total number of people during that designated time range. Now you're going to break them down based on the various categories and screening characteristics. So the first category is the people with external contamination. So you'll enter the total number. And then you'll break it down for the types of people that had external contamination. So for this entry, we just are worrying about pregnant and those younger than 18. And you'll continue that pattern for the various fields as you work your way down. So people with internal contamination, people sent to or referred to hospitals, people sent to or referred to a shelter, and people with signs of ARS. Note that when you do have your contamination criteria already defined, when you are looking at your screen population details entry form, we do have a description to tell you, the number of people who were identified to have detectable external contamination of blank, and blank being the value in unit that you define. So this just helps with understanding what external contamination means for your event in this case. So something to keep an eye out there just to help you with your data entry. The next section, if you have animals as being accepted into your CRC, will be the animal section. You can edit the contamination criteria and characteristics if you need to, just like with people. If the add criteria is grayed out, that means that you've already selected all of the criteria, and same with characteristics. So here for animals, I have household pets and service animals, and those are the only two characteristics, so therefore I cannot add any additional ones. You'll scroll down, you'll enter the total number of animals screened during that time range. Animals with external contamination, you can read the description to know that it's 100 CPM, not relative to background. You'll then enter the total number of animals with external contamination, regardless of their characteristics, and then break it down between household pets and service animals. Again, you'll continue that pattern for the various categories and characteristics. And last but not least, if you do have vehicles as being accepted, you'll be presented with the same contamination criteria for vehicles and characteristics for vehicles that you can set. Here, my add criteria for vehicles is not grayed out, so I can add additional criteria if I would like. And then I do see my 3 characteristics are already selected, and then the add characteristics for vehicles is grayed out. I'll enter my total number of vehicles screened during that time range, the number of vehicles with fixed contamination, so that's 100 CPM, not relative to background here. And then I'll break it down by private vehicle, city public vehicle, and emergency response vehicle. And just like the others, I'll continue that pattern for the various categories that we have for vehicles. Once you enter all of your information, you'll save the entry and you have successfully created a screened population record. Now that you've entered some data, I'm sure you want to view it and review the various pieces of information that you've entered. You can view this data by going into the same space that you were just at, so opening up your data section. If you have multiple hazards enabled, you'll need to open up the radiological section. And then you'll select population data to be brought to your population data page. We previously just selected the create screen population record, but now we're not going to create a new one, we're going to view the current data that's already been entered. For this event, there are 2 community reception centers that have population data associated with them. And then I can see the total number of people screened, total number of animals screened, and total numbers of vehicles screened columns. This does differ from what previously existed. If you click on any of the numbers in the columns, it's going to give you a breakdown. So this is the total number of people screened for the Baltimore Center. At the top, I have the total number, which is 50. And then I have the breakdown. So people with external contamination, the numbers with internal, signs of ARS, sent to referred to hospitals, public shelters, people biosade, etc. I can expand this information even further if I would like. So if I wanted to know the characteristics of all those people with internal contamination, I'll select this side arrow to drop down the menu, and I can see now the greater breakdown. If you want to view more information about the population records associated with the CRC, you'll then want to open up the individual details of that facility. So we were looking at the total number of data at that CRC within the event, but if you wanted to look a little more granularly to see, each time period that was entered, you'll open up that CRC. And here we have the details. This is my screen population data page. I have the name of my community reception center, and if I scroll down, I'll see the screen population record details. Here I'll be able to see that there are 2 records associated with the CRC. And then I can see the total screened, total number of people, animals, and vehicles. Just like the previous page, I can click on any of those numbers to get a better view as to what went into those numbers. So again, total number of people screened and the various criteria that we have. Now, if I want to view the most granular view, the most detailed view of a population entry, I'll select that magnifying glass again to be brought into that single time frame. So this is about a 48-hour time period. I'll open it up And now I'm going to see this form in a very similar format of how you entered it. So we have the various tabs for people, animals, and vehicles. You can expand the criteria to view the various characteristics for more information. Same with animals and vehicles. From this page, you can also edit the form. So if you need to adjust anything, or you need to redefine the characteristics or contamination criteria, that's something you can do. And I'm just playing this again so you can sort of see the interaction between the UI and the data. The update to the existing module is really to enhance the flexibility of the feature. So this was really just, like what we just like to describe as a phase one. We're always looking for feedback and suggestions. Right now, these are the fixed pieces of characteristics and criteria, but that's not to say we can't add any more in the future. And that really concludes the overview of how to utilize these new enhancements. A copy of these slides and a step-by-step job aid of using the population monitoring feature can be found in the resource library, so definitely check out that updated job aid. Again, it's going to have a step-by-step, screenshot-by-screenshot guide. If you have any questions about the population monitoring feature, if you want to enable it for your organization, or just any questions in general, shoot us an email at support@cburnresponder.net.